Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Battleship Bismarck, Part 10. On May 16, 1941, Lutyens reported that the Bismarck and Prinz Eugen task force would be ready for exercise Rhine on the 18th. Accordingly, Group North ordered him to enter the Great Belt at nightfall on the 19th. At about the same time, 2 freighters moved into the Atlantic to act as scouts, and a store ship and 5 tankers steamed for the Norwegian Sea and the Atlantic, where they would resupply the task force. Aboard Bismarck on May the 18th, Lutyens went over the operational details of the exercise with Lindemann and Kapitän zur See Helmut Brinkmann of the Prinz Eugen. It was decided that, if the weather was favorable, they would bypass Korsfjord and make directly for the Norwegian Sea to rendezvous with the Weissenburg. Then, if possible, go on through the Denmark Strait. There, they would be under cover of the Arctic fog, yet with the help of radar able to maintain high speed. If enemy cruisers and auxiliary cruisers should appear in our path, they might have to be attacked. Paramount, however, was the preservation of the Bismarck and Prinz Eugen so that they could spend maximum time in the area of operations. They were to proceed independently to the island of Rügen, where the task force would be formed on the morning of May 19th. His operational order of April 22nd shows that Lutyens favored the route through the Denmark Strait from the outset. He gave it priority over any other. After all, hadn't he done pretty well when he broke out through the Denmark Strait in the Gneisenau in early February? Why shouldn't the poor visibility that prevails there most of the year help him again? Apparently, that was how Lutyens thought, although I do not know for certain. In any case, he apparently just took no notice of Group North's recommendation that he use the Iceland-Faroe passage. That command had warned against use of the Denmark Strait for what it viewed as very good reasons. Its channel was relatively narrow, which made it easier for the enemy to watch. It would be simpler for the British to maintain contact in the north, because their forces there could draw their southern patrols into the search, which would not work in reverse. Time and fuel would be saved if, immediately after leaving Norway, Lutyens took the nearer and shorter southern course, and on the southern course he would be able to gain a greater lead over the British ships that would sortie from Scapa Flow when word of the attempted German breakout was received. The intensification of preparations for the approaching operation, the embarkation of the fleet staff with all its gear, the bunker cleaning to which the entire crew was assigned on May the 17th, all these developments made it clear that our departure from Gotenhafen was imminent. Bunker cleaning. A filthy job. A petty officer and a seaman, armed with a fresh air pipe to enable them to breathe and a safety lamp, had to go into each bunker to clean out the sludge. They collected the muck in buckets, which were then passed from hand to hand via the upper deck to barges made fast alongside. Many a bucket reached the upper deck empty, its black contents having wound up on the men's working uniforms somewhere along the way. The dirtiest work was done by Polish forced laborers, with whom the language difference made communication difficult. But after 24 hours, the job was done and the bunkers were spanking clean and ready to take on a new supply of fuel. The Polish workers were rewarded with schnapps and cigarettes. Liberty was cancelled as of noon on May 17th. Towards midday on the 18th, Bismarck left the wharf at Gotenhafen. The fleet band stationed on the upper deck struck up Mussi Den, the tune traditionally played on large warships leaving for a long cruise. I must admit that I was more than a little surprised by this musical advertisement that Exercise Rhine had begun. I think it highly doubtful that either our fleet commander or our captain knew we were to have this musical program. In all likelihood, it did not occur to any responsible officer that such a thing would happen, and therefore nothing was done to stop it. The bandmaster, aware that our departure was imminent, probably just automatically chose that song without giving the matter another thought. We did not put to sea immediately, however, but dropped anchor in the roadstead in view of Gotenhafen. Great masses of provisions and fuel oil still had to be taken aboard. Although thousands of tons of fuel flowed into our bunkers, we could not fill them completely because a hose ruptured, causing the fueling operation to be called off so that the mess could be cleaned up. By that time, our schedule forced provisioning to be brought to an end. The ship was not far away of being fueled to capacity, and no one then suspected how important this shortfall would become. Battleship Bismarck sailed at 0200 on May the 19th, 1941. The crew was in a state of tense anticipation that comes when a long period of preparation is finally over and the action for which it was designed is about to begin. Their faith in their captain and their ship was boundless, even though they knew nothing about the operation on which they were embarking. Now, they heard Lindemann announcing over the loudspeakers that we were going to conduct warfare against British trade in the North Atlantic for a period of several months. Our objective was to destroy as much enemy tonnage as possible. This message confirmed what the men had long suspected. Their apprehension about the unknown was replaced by certainty. Below, the gentle vibration of the engines reminded them of the tremendous power that made their ship a deadly weapon. Our passage to the west under a cloudy sky with medium wind and seas was uneventful. Escorted by the destroyers Z-23 and Friedrich Eckholt and preceded by a Speerbrecher, the task force sailed as a unit after leaving Rügen and reached designated positions on schedule. Around 22:30, the Hans Lodi, carrying the commander of the 6th Destroyer Flotilla, Fregattenkapitän Alfred Schulze-Hinrichs, joined the formation and we steamed north through the Great Belt. To maintain the secrecy of our mission, the commander of the Baltic Security Forces announced that the Great Belt and the Kattegat would be closed to commercial traffic on the night of the 19th and 20th May, as well as the following morning. Next day, when we were in the Kattegat, the Hans Lodi sounded our first aircraft alarm. We aboard Bismarck assumed that we had been sighted by British reconnaissance planes. However, they turned out to be our own fighters, of whose arrival we had not been informed. In contrast to the preceding day, May the 20th was clear and sunny. It was perfectly beautiful. The shimmering green sea, corded with the light blue of many small swells, stretched to the far horizon. As we passed the small flat island of Anholt to port, the tall, slender lighthouse on its northeastern end was clearly visible. This radiant weather might have been seen as a good omen for our generation. If only we hadn't had to steam in such clear view of the Swedish coast and among innumerable Danish and Swedish fishing boats. They seemed to be everywhere, these little white craft with their chugging motors, some of them bobbing up and down beside us. Not only that, but steamers from all sorts of countries were passing through the Kattegat. If this wasn't a giveaway of what we were doing here, what was? Surely the appearance of our task force in Scandinavian waters would attract attention that might well work to our disadvantage. Would Sweden's neutrality, which at that time was benevolent towards Germany, avert the military damage that the vigilant Norwegian underground was certainly eager to inflict on us? It was not exactly a secret that the Norwegian underground was in touch with London. But more than that. As our Seekriegsleitung was well aware, Stockholm and Helsinki were hotbeds of British intelligence, and British naval attachés there reported all known German ship movements and other German military operations to London. Indeed, we knew that on March 15, 1941, the British naval attaché in Stockholm informed the Admiralty that an organization had been set up to observe ships passing through the Great Belt and that its reports could reach him in 12 hours. Captain Trowbridge, too, had thought about navigation in these waters when he made a duty visit to the area in July of 1939. "I should think," he confided to his diary, "it would not be difficult to slip through unseen on a dark night, provided the ship was darkened. It would be the obvious place for a submarine patrol in time of war." It ran through my head that enemy agents were being handed a unique opportunity to identify and report our task force, just as it was putting to sea. On top of that, the weather was perfect for aerial reconnaissance. I could not see how Exercise Rhine could possibly be kept secret. I became still more concerned when around 1300 the Swedish aircraft-carrying cruiser Götland came in view to starboard against the Swedish coast. The Götland, in accordance with a long-standing training program, was just then on her way to gunnery practice of Vinga, that is in Swedish territorial waters directly west of Göteborg, and even steamed on a parallel course to us for a while. Assuming that the Götland would inform the Swedish Admiralty that we had been sighted, Lütjens radioed Group North, "At 1300, aircraft carrying cruiser Jutland passed in clear view. Therefore, anticipate formation will be reported." The Commander-in-Chief of Group North, Generaladmiral Rolf Karls, replied, "Because of the strictly neutral conduct of Sweden, I do not think the danger of being compromised by the Swedish warship is any greater than from the already present systematic enemy surveillance of the entrance to the Baltic." But if Lütjens did fear that we had been dangerously compromised, it was he, not Karls, who was right. Captain Egren of the Jutland immediately sent a secret radio signal reporting our position through the senior naval officer at Göteborg to the commander of the West Coast Naval District at Nya Varvet, who in turn notified naval headquarters in Stockholm. Early in 1941, a few high-ranking officers in the Swedish intelligence service privately came to the conclusion that a weakening of Germany would be greatly to the advantage of their country. They considered the German invasion of Denmark and Norway an outrageous attack on the sovereignty of all Scandinavia and, after February of 1941, worked closely with the Norwegian underground. Some of their contacts with this movement were through the Norwegian government in exile's military attaché in Stockholm, Colonel Roger Lund, who had become a friend and trusted informant of the British naval attaché there, Captain Henry W. Denham. On the evening of May the 20th, Roger Lund learned from Lieutenant Commander Egon Ternberg, who belonged to the Swedish Secret Intelligence Service, the so-called Bureau C of the Armed Forces High Command in Stockholm, that, during the day, 2 large German warships and several merchantmen had passed through the Kattegat on a northerly course under air cover. He hastened to the British embassy, where he was told that Denham was at a certain restaurant in the city. He pursued him there and gave him the important news. Both returned immediately to the embassy and, with reference to an earlier observation that day, cabled the Admiralty in London, "Kattegat today, May the 20th. A. This afternoon, 11 German merchant ships passed Lanka North. B. At 1500 hours, 2 large warships escorted by 3 destroyers, 5 escort vessels, 10 or 12 aircraft passed Maastricht, course northwest, 2058/20. On May the 23rd, Denham wrote Roger Lund a letter of thanks. It read, "Your very valuable report of enemy warships in the Kattegat 2 days ago has enabled us to locate in the fjords near Bergen on the 21st 1 Bismarck battleship, 1 Eugen cruiser. Naturally, there is no harm in your making use of this to enlighten your source. Thank you so much for your very helpful efforts. Let us hope your friend will continue to be such a valuable asset." Ternberg had seen the Jutland sighting report in the Admiralty in Stockholm and immediately advised Roger Lund of its contents, but for security reasons he did not reveal the source of his information. And it was routine for the Jutland to report the presence of foreign warships in or near Swedish territorial waters. Of course, at the time I did not know of these events, but even so, it did seem to me on May the 20th that there had been far too many opportunities for our formation to be sighted, and when I thought about what this might do to our mission, I felt that a shadow had fallen over it. I doubt that I was the only one in the ship who had such thoughts, yet none of my younger shipmates at any rate said anything about it. Also, what good would it have done? Nothing could be changed. The only thing to do was hope for the best. No one aboard Bismarck had any inkling of the rapidity with which the news would reach the British Admiralty or of the energetic and successively wider-reaching steps the Sea Lords would take. Around 1600 on May the 20th, we were escorted through our own minefields by the 5th Minesweeping Flotilla, which was under the command of Korvettenkapitän Rudolf Lell. When we arrived at our rendezvous with the flotilla, we were dismayed to find a number of merchant ships waiting to take advantage of the cleared channel. Their presence was liable to endanger the security of Exercise Rhine and therefore was extremely unwelcome. However, it gave the Swedish observers and their British friends the impression that our task force and the merchantmen were operating together. As has been said, they so stated in their reports. Consequently, in London the Admiralty put a lot of effort into puzzling over what the Germans could be intending to do with such a combination of ships and how they might counter whatever it was. When we left the minefield, the minesweepers were detached and Bismarck and Prinz Eugen, still escorted by destroyers, steered a zigzag course at 17 knots to avoid submarines. The south coast of Norway came into view during a magnificent summer sunset. The outlines of the beautiful, austere landscape, with the black silhouettes of its mountains raised against the red glow of the sky, enabled me to forget for a moment all about the war. Following the line of the coast, we turned westward. We would resume our northerly course after we had rounded the southwestern tip of Norway. Between 2100 and 2200, we passed through the southernmost channel in the Kristiansand minefield, then proceeded at a speed of 27 knots. At all times, half the guns were manned. I was off duty that evening and went to see the film that was showing in the wardroom, Play in the Summer Wind. We carried enough films to keep us entertained for the several months we were to be at sea, but after that evening, Exercise Rhine kept us so busy that we were never able to put on another program. Little did we know, as we watched the only movie shown on the Bismarck during the operation, that, on the coast near Kristiansand, Viggo Axelsen, a member of the Norwegian underground, was watching our formation and that another Norwegian actually photographed it. Through his binoculars, Axelsen observed our passage and noted 20-30 hours, a battleship, probably German, westerly course, and gave this report to his friend Odd Stardheim, who, from a nearby hideout, immediately radioed a coded report to London. There it reached the desk of Colonel J.S. Wilson, Chief of the British Intelligence Service for Scandinavia, to whom all reports from the Norwegian underground were routed. He relayed it to the British Admiralty, where it provided confirmation of Denham's message. Around 30 minutes after being discovered by Axelsen, our task force was sighted by another member of the Norwegian underground, Edvard K. Barth, who was researching birds' nesting habits on Herøya Island. He saw our task force pass through a corridor in the minefield, turn on a westerly course, and proceed at a slow speed of around 10 knots. Using a telephoto lens shortly before sunset, he snapped the surprising picture that presented itself to him. Bismarck, Prinz Eugen, and 2 destroyers, the third remained just outside his field of view, and through such a coincidence made the last photograph of the task force taken from shore. Early the next morning, Bismarck went to general quarters. From then on, we would have to be on guard against British submarines, especially during the hours of twilight. Shortly after 0700, 4 aircraft came into view, mere specks against the sun. Were they British or our own? So quickly did they vanish that we wondered if we had imagined them. It was impossible to say, and the supposed sighting was soon crowded out of our minds by other events. Not long thereafter, we reached the rocky cliffs near Bergen, and before noon ran past barren, mountainous countryside and picturesque wooden houses to enter Kursfjord under a brilliant sun. Bismarck went into Glimstad Fjord, south of Bergen, and anchored at the entrance to Fjordanger Fjord, about 500 meters from shore. Prinz Eugen and the destroyers went farther north to Kalvanes Bay, where they took on fuel from a tanker. With the thought that, in the hazy visibility of these northern waters, our black and white stripes might stand out and betray us, both we and Prinz Eugen painted over our camouflage with the standard outboard grey of German warships. Apart from that activity, we simply waited for the day to pass. The sun shone continuously, and many members of the German occupation forces in Norway, understandably eager to see the new Bismarck, came out to visit us. One episode gave everyone who witnessed it a hearty laugh. A soldier, who apparently had run out of tobacco and assumed that we would have a great store of it, got a boat and came out to Bismarck. As his nutshell bobbed up and down beside the giant battleship, our men lowered down to him on strings so many cigarettes and so much tobacco that, unless he shared his booty with his comrades, he had enough to smoke for a whole year. We were quite close inshore and could feast our eyes on terra firma, from which many Norwegians stared at us. Through our rangefinders, we could see them having breakfast in their little cottages on the mountainsides. I couldn't help wondering how many of them were looking with something more than idle curiosity. Very frightful, when you think about that in a week everyone sunning here on board today could be dead. Maschinengast Statz heard that said by someone whom he did not know and was already turning to go. A fateful week later, he saw him again in British captivity and learned that it was Maschinengefreiter Budig who had spoken these words. With these foreboding words, time to end the episode. Exercise Rhine is finally a go, and even though stealth was tantamount, Bismarck setting sail was pretty much immediately known to British Admiralty. The very last photo taken from ashore is quite famous, and I've put it on screen for your consideration. This, together with the incomplete fueling, will set the ultimate fate of the big ship in motion. So stay tuned, and I will see you again in the next episode. Cheers.